Hi everyone, I'm Murray Olborn for IPSA and the goalball subcommittee, and today I have the pleasure of interviewing Team Australia women, and with us today is head coach Peter Corr and Australian player Brodie Smith. Thanks to you both for joining us today.
Thank you.
And thank you, Murray. Thank you, IPSA.
And so the aim of this get-together and interview process is to promote goalball to the world, and in preparation for what is hopefully about to happen in Tokyo in 2021, to be able to promote goalball viewership on the stream, so we can get more people looking at our unique and fabulous sport. So just to start off with a question about qualification for you both. Love, Pete, maybe for you to start off, and then Brodie to give your feelings about it. Can you walk us through your qualification journey, both on a regional level and then obviously through World Championships and the IPSA Goalball World Championship, or the IPSA Goalball Championships as well, that happened in Fort Wayne?
Well, as seems to be the case, there always seems to be a less than direct qualification path. I think the rules are really good, and I think as a sport, I think gradually we're getting closer to following the sequence. But the difficulty for us this time, and the thrill for us, was the fact that the IPSA qualifying tournament occurred before two regional championships, which I hope that for future events, what will happen is things will happen in sequential order, so that the regional champions are sorted, and the final qualification is the best of the rest of who haven't qualified. And I think that you get less distortion. However, it was a fantastic opportunity in June for us in Fort Wayne, in terms of both our performance, and people will look at scores, and we finished in 4th position in that tournament, but the teams who finished ahead of us qualified through their region. So whilst it was, particularly when we beat Canada convincingly to get ourselves into the semi-finals, nothing personal, Canada, but we knew that we'd maximised our chances. Probably the difficulty for us was that instead of being able to absolutely rejoice at that moment, which we would have been able to do had the regional champions not been there, we had to keep our focus on, I guess, winning the semi-final, which would have guaranteed, rather than waiting for two regional championships to come place. So we were very, very pleased, very, very excited, but at the same time, we were subdued and calm. And I really feel for the girls, because I think that was a moment that they didn't get an opportunity to celebrate, which was outside their control. And I think there should have been an absolute celebration of their achievements at that tournament.
Yeah. Brodie, how did you feel through that qualification process of having to go to a regional championship and then on to the IPSA World Games in Fort Wayne to qualify, and then not knowing?
Yeah, so the whole process, it was my first time going through the whole process in terms of trying to qualify for a Paralympic Games, and it was nerve-wracking, to say the least. And in Fort Wayne in particular, as a team, I reckon that's one of the strongest times we've ever played together. And we were just really communicating, and we just seemed to really be playing at our best. And I was over the moon to come forth. But as Pete said, we couldn't celebrate the fact that we'd worked so hard to get that result, because we didn't know if we were going to qualify still. Even though we'd put the effort in to get as far as we could, there was still no guarantee or certainty that we'd made it, which then caused for a few stressful more months while we then had to train for the regional championship in Japan, which was in December. And that caused more stress and anxiety around the whole qualification thing, because we didn't know for sure, and a lot rested on that regional championships as to whether we would qualify or not, potentially, if the results didn't change from the Fort Wayne tournament. But once we found out we had qualified, it was a really awesome moment. To know that all that work that we had put in to make it to semi-finals in the World Qualification Games in June last year, it was all worth it, and it was a really awesome feeling to know that we still had so much more to look forward to and more room to grow as we were leading into the Paralympics that was meant to be this year, but hopefully are still going to be going ahead next year. So
great.
And it was a testament to their resilience. I mean, some people will look at the results at regionals, but at that point in time, we knew we'd qualified, and we actually only went away with 5 athletes, 5 senior athletes, and we went, and one of them, Mika, went away with a major injury, which he subsequently had surgery on. So we were a lot more restricted in the style of game that we were able to play, and it was much more about the development of the next group for the future, or filling in the gaps that would make us better in Tokyo, rather than the outcome. We're very process-driven rather than outcome-driven.
And Pete, can you tell us a little bit about, you've been with the team now over an extended period of time as an assistant coach and now as head coach. Can you tell us about the history in your eyes of women's goalball in Australia and how the team has developed over the last few years?
Well, the women are a fantastic example of a resilient group of women who said they're not going to let any obstacle get in their way. When I first came on board, it was at the invitation of, or the suggestion of Paralympics Australia, because we were a managed sport and a funded sport by Paralympics Australia. They had a part-time employed coach. They had funding. They were managed from within Paralympics Australia. And the goal was set that we needed to get a group of pretty talented young women an opportunity to qualify for Rio. That was the goal. We qualified for London. We qualified 4 years early. And rather than focus on that, you know what happens in a Paralympic cycle. They look at results or they look at performance. And we were highly competitive in London, but we were 4 years ahead of our time. As a result of how people interpreted that result, the management of the team changed and less funding was, so rather than seeing it as a Rio goal, they saw it as an outcome-driven thing. So we got back on board and stuck together, and we actually qualified, and it was advertised that we were qualified. I won't get too controversial, but it was advertised that we were qualified for Rio. Then the qualification under the universality clause was taken away from us and the Czech Republic men and offered to Africa. Good, fantastic for Africa. But that was done without a lot of explanation. That was another, I don't know, slap in the face, if you like. Then, for anyone who watched the wonderful documentary that on the history of the Paralympics, Rising Phoenix, you understand a bit better. And we had no idea that it was that much difficulty getting Rio up and running. 4 weeks out, it was nearly cancelled again. Well, for us, our invitation came when Russia was universally banned from the Olympics, or the Paralympics, sorry. And we had 7 weeks to prepare for Rio. And we had to not only go through a very intense training period without thrashing our players, but we also had to, I guess, prove to our own Paralympic organising committee that we were a professional enough unit to represent us on that stage. Did a good job of that. History will say that with 12 seconds to go, we were in front, which would have put us into the quarterfinals. And in 12 seconds, we went from being in front of Ukraine to drawing with Ukraine, which is a good result in itself, particularly with that preparation. But my main emphasis has been to keep a group of girls together and to, I guess, motivate them and capitalise on their capacity to just be determined, because from then, we are now a non-funded program, as anyone in Australia, so they're self-funded, sorry. We get some support, but we don't get any monetary support anymore. So the girls paid for themselves to go to Fort Wayne, paid for themselves to train to Fort Wayne. A little bit was offset, but that's a pretty fantastic effort. And a year out of Tokyo, we qualified in our own right, and we're looking forward to a wonderful 12-month preparation, which will now turn into a 2-year preparation. So I guess what I'm most proud of about the team is I think they're resilient and determined, and they don't seem, we get down about obstacles, but we find a way to battle. And I think that's testament to Australian women's goalball.
Do you think that the history of all of that maybe plays a little bit into your favour in preparing the team in the current circumstances of COVID to say, okay, well, there's some changes that have come in and there's some roadblocks and we don't know. You've been through that to some degree before as a team.
I think that's a fantastic question, Murray. And one of the things we've been talking about as a team, as difficult as we have not being able to go and see each other interstate, and that's still in place, this is the way we prepare. Australia is isolated. We can't go out once a month and play a tournament somewhere, which we would dearly love to. It's expensive to get to Europe. It's expensive to get to the United States. And the last time Fort Wayne, we went in 2 waves of players, and one of the waves got held over because of storms and delays. We nearly didn't make the starting line, you know. But from a coaching perspective, and you'd know this, you try and draw on those negative experiences and realise that you can overcome things. So we've got some pretty clear plans about where we need to get better. But in terms of this isolated type preparation, whilst it doesn't make us feel good, we think we might be pretty okay at it because we've faced it pretty much our whole history.
Yeah, absolutely. Brodie, question I'm asking all of the players is, when you found out that COVID-19 was obviously going to impact how the games were supposed to be run this year, how did you feel about that? What was your emotion around that?
Honestly, I was crushed because this is something that I've worked very hard for over a number of years. It's not like an experience that I decided a couple months ago that I was like, oh yeah, Paralympics, that sounds fun. I'll jump on this bandwagon for like 2 months, see how it goes. No, it wasn't like that at all. It's something that I put a lot of effort and time and energy into, and to hear, finding out that the whole process before we knew it would be cancelled this year was very nerve-wracking and very stressful for me, because I'd just gone from feeling the excitement and like pure joy of being selected and qualifying for my first ever Paralympics, which is a life dream come true. And to have that kind of taken away just as quick, it was really hard to deal with, because as I said, it's something that I've invested so much of myself into getting this far, to have that whole process then just kind of crumble around me. It was scary and upsetting. In saying all that though, it hasn't been cancelled for good. We're still training, still preparing. It's still possibly going ahead next year. So with that in mind, that postponement call gave me some ease around the whole situation. But yeah, it's been a very, very long 2020, and we're only halfway through, but well, just over halfway now. But yeah, it's been a roller coaster of emotions, that's for sure.
Well, I can say you're not alone. Every team that I've spoken to so far in this journey of, I guess, profiling the Paralympic teams, every person has said a similar thing to you. So the big thing is for athletes that you're not alone. You know, everyone is going through the same challenges and the same disappointments, and having to, kind of rally themselves and get back on track and understand that there's a future, and that the present doesn't necessarily dictate what's going to happen in that future. So yeah, every team that I've spoken to has had trouble training or being isolated or not being able to play their tournaments that were on their agenda. Every athlete that I've spoken to has had that disappointment and that frustration, but then tried to come back to a center point like you just talked about. So yeah, it's across the world, and everybody's feeling the pain of what COVID is. And from that greater health perspective, we all hope that things will improve, but there's certainly a journey to play out. So I think your comments are very natural and very along the lines of every other player in the world at the moment.
Yeah.
And the potential excitement there, Murray, is that if we get to Tokyo and there are a number of things that are just so damn exciting, it will be a way of reunifying the world, because it'll be a miracle that we've all got there. For goalball, I think, take Australia, for instance, we're one of the 7 sports that will be live streamed. Well, that's never happened in Australia. And it's a credit that it's a sport worth watching and engaging in. And I think that's a credit to the Tokyo organising committee and the Japanese Goalball Association, because I still take pride of place. They've got one of their coins, the Paralympic coin, has a goalballer on it. So we're making steps forward, and the potential excitement of being able to get to a Paralympics under this incredible difficulty could be just something which will never be repeated.
Tell us about some of the challenges as a coach you're thinking about and having to face in the preparation, but also immediately, prior to hopefully being in Tokyo. What are some of the things that you're focused on right now as the head coach?
Probably the biggest obstacle has been helping the girls manage their disappointment. We were ready. We would be in Japan now. We would be competing now. I'm hoping that with the year to go that there's a little light at the end of the tunnel, but to provide them with information in such an uncertain environment, and I can personalise this because I'm in Victoria, and I get lots of empathy and sympathy about our shutdown right now. We can't go 5K from our home, and we can't go out between 8 o'clock at night and 5 o'clock in the morning, and we can't go to work unless we're an essential service. I've got people from New South Wales and other states in Australia all ringing in to check how I am, but it's not like they understand what it's like being locked down, and I think the same thing applies for the girls. It's one thing for us all to say, yes, that's disappointing, but we've got to do little things to try and help them cope with the fact that when they're going to sleep at night, they're disappointed with opportunity lost if we take it on being there now. But I guess there's this question mark still there. So we will get to March or April and we'll know things. And if this goes, this is going to be a really exciting preparation. So my focus has been on the health of the girls, the mental welfare, whether I can handle that or not. That's difficult because they share lots and they don't want to share it all. And they sure as hell don't want to share their disappointment and their down feelings, but we're getting better at that. We've got support of Paralympics Australia in that as of 3 weeks ago, I'm now able to remotely coach into the States. That's difficult to adapt to for anybody, but the signs in the last couple of weeks, we got into Hunter last Monday, we were into Brisbane for the second time, and the team's got the capacity to come in on a Thursday and see what we're doing in Melbourne. So I think that will reconnect people, and I think it's been really good to have that. And if you look at the big picture, it it will accelerate a technology which may be useful when we're a pretty big country to coach between state and state anyway. So I can look big picture, but you'll have to excuse my bias. My bias is looking after the little picture of the girls who are going through it. And that's my #1 priority.
Peter just talked about remote coaching, and you're in a position, Brodie, where the assistant coach of the team is your dad, and you work with him on a weekly basis. But tell me about the value that you see or potentially see in allowing Pete to see your sessions and for you to have those feedback when you're not able to be in an Australian training camp.
Oh, it's really good because don't get me wrong, I love my dad and I think he's a great coach, but sometimes you just need a second opinion and to hear a second voice on the things, so like the things that need to be worked on. My dad's pretty good. We stay pretty on track and on top of the things that I really need to fix, but it's been really good to have Pete come in because Pete knows the overall direction of where the team is going and exactly what he kind of wants to see as a collective team. So having his input into what I need to work on to help achieve that team goal and unity of being the best Australian women's team we can be, it's been really helpful because I value both his input and my dad's input immensely when it comes to training. And I take everything I can on board because I'm all for improving and striving to be better and to represent Australia with as much ability and skill as I can muster. So I've really enjoyed having Pete come in and I hope you keep coming in, Pete, because I'm always down for your advice and trying to trick me out, which you can regularly do, which is kind of sad to admit. But.
Well, we're in a unique situation. I mean, it's so exciting having sounds crazy, but a father-daughter. We almost have your mum on board too, Brodie, at times, and we have your sister on board. But Simon, one of the agreements we've made, certainly in the lead up to qualification and that, is that when we went into camp, I would give a lot more of the instruction to Brodie for that very reason, to get a different voice on it. They have a great relationship and all that. But like anyone who spends a lot of time and a lot of preparation together, they get used to each other, they get familiar, and that's a real positive, but it can be a limiter. So we've been pretty disciplined at Simon being able to do a fantastic job of coaching, but take a little bit more of a background role with regards to feedback to Broads when we're all together. And we've worked on it. You know, he is just such a great coach, and that really benefits Brodie. But you do need different voices, and even if the different voice is giving the same message, and I think Brodie responds to that, and we've analysed as a team so that we're conscious of it, and they're conscious of the effects of it, and we're trying to turn it to our advantage, not just take it for granted.
Yeah, absolutely. Just talking about, I guess, the journey and qualification pathway, you're right there, Pete, and the team's really, had a progression that's been quite good to watch as far as qualifying for 3 Paralympics in a row, which is really important. And then, that consistency through the World Championships and regional levels, and then IPSA World Games, the last 2 IPSA World Games, Australia finishing 4th in both of those. But you've had some breakthrough victories at the World Championships when you defeated Israel, and then the one that you talked about over Canada when it really counted. Tell us, in your mind, what the steps the team has to take to get to, that semi-final level, that medal round level in a Paralympic Games.
That is, again, a really good question. We know that we have we've changed from being just a team who competes hard to a good offensive team. 8 years ago, we were okay offensively, but we had a heavy emphasis when I first came on board that if we kept the scores low and we got our defence right, then we'd be more competitive internationally. We did that. We kept scores low. If you look back to London results, we gave ourselves opportunities against Japan, the eventual gold medalists. We had 3 opportunities to score and had kept them scoreless for a long, long period of time. They went on to win the gold medal. So we achieved that. And then coming back from that, we said, well, okay, we understand defense and the importance of containing goals and containing threats from other countries, but we need to be able to attack as well. We need to be able to score more. It's a balance of the 2 things. So we embarked on that. I would have to say, and you would be quite familiar with this because you work with us with the youth women who have had some fantastic successes collectively, and with Brodie's talent for throwing. So this is, as she said, you know, it's a bit scary when you step up to the women's. There is a big jump.
Yeah.
Because you've got some wonderful, wonderful players. Our key is that we are not going to copy anyone else. If we try and play China and play China at a Chinese game, the Chinese style, China train 364 days of the year. We don't do that. We're courting failure. So we are playing an Australian, we are a little bit more risk takers. We try and do things different, and we've got feedback from other teams. America always are apprehensive when they play us because of our switching and our willingness to not just play one position. Now, we could go and tie down the way everyone else plays, the way America plays goalball, the way Japan plays goalball, the way Israel play goalball. But what we've prided ourselves on is we want to play Australian goalball and use our strengths. And our strengths are that we have a really good throwing team. The girls have done a really good job at starting to own the game rather than it be just coach driven. So strategically, they understand what we're trying to do, and so we can be a lot more efficient from the bench. And we're going back to now getting that balance right. Bounce, offense from other teams, everyone's having difficulty with. So how are we going to collectively fix that? But I'd have to say, if we can get our defense right, we have an attacking team who can crack other teams open. We keep control of the score, we will break through. We know how to create pressure. We know how to utilize scoreboard pressure. And if we can eliminate the errors, which the signs are, that's what we're doing, the errors that are in our control, will be a big threat come Tokyo. Teams will have to beat us. We won't beat ourselves.
Yeah, I've spoken to Team USA and Team Brazil so far, and now yourselves, and we talk about the depth in women's goalball and how deep it is, and that basically any of these 10 teams that have qualified for Tokyo could be on the medal stand, and it just takes a goal or a game to make that difference. How do you see preparing for the other 9 teams? And because it is so deep, you know, how do you have to adjust your style to other styles that you play? You mentioned obviously the China style, the Japan style, European style, American are different again. So how do you adjust now preparing for that, you know, such a deep pool of games?
I'm happy to comment on that.
Good.
It's not so much us preparing or changing the way that we play to accommodate for other teams. It's us working together as an Australian team to better our goalball in that regard. We're not trying to play to the other team's game. We're trying to play to our game, and that it doesn't, certain teams have certain attributes of how they play and the styles and ways in which they play. And obviously as a team, we would need to make small adjustments depending on who it is we're versing. But overall, our focus is on our ability to play together and to play strong rather than accommodating our playing style per game. it's more as a collective whole in order to achieve our team goals and what's the word I'm looking for? Our team goals and priorities.
We know that we've got some teams, take China, who are right up there in the ranking and have been for many years. You look at the semi-finals the last time we played them, I mean, we had China under considerable pressure. For the first time against a number of the teams ranked above us, we're going out there and we're scoring early and putting them under scoreboard pressure. Now, in order to learn how to manage that, you have to put yourself in that position, and we are putting ourselves in that position. So what do you do next? You're now 1 goal up or you're 2 goals up. How do you get your mental preparation to say, okay, let's keep in the moment? So we're very much about learning better how to be in the moment of that actual game, not worrying about who it is. There are 3 people, we're blindfolded. We know lots about what we think we're coming, but the next ball is the next ball coming from this position, and you have to listen. So we're doing lots of work on listening better, tracking better. What can we do which makes our game better, regardless of who we're playing at the other end? And that's those 1 and 2 percenters that you have to get better at. And that's where we're very focused.
It's definitely, I think you're right in what you said, both of you, but Brodie, I really like your comment that you need to focus on your team and your game to be successful. You can't worry about the peripherals, about what's going on around you, and it's how you play as a team and how you act together that's going to make that difference. And that's definitely one thing that we've heard from the top teams that I've interviewed, is that really strong team focus on what they need to do and how they need to execute really comes through. So that's really pleasing to hear. I think you guys are obviously on the ball, which is great. Tell us a little bit about the rivalries that you enjoy. Obviously, we've talked a little bit about the regional aspect of the rivalry and then, playing teams. But from a player point of view first, Brodie, like, you obviously enjoy every game that you play, but what are the games that, you've really, in your history of playing, really been able to get up for and really enjoy that competition aspect against rivals?
See, for me personally as a player, it's not so much specific teams. It's more the situation that I'm in affects how I play and the games that I really get fired up for. So particularly in youth, for example, there were two main games that I had a lot of fire and passion to play my best, and I really enjoyed the competition because it was tough, it was challenging, it was engaging, and that was the semi-finals and the gold medal match. So the semi-finals were against the Brazil youth girls, and the finals was against Russia. There was both teams were very strong teams and played very, very well. And it was just the pressure of being in that situation that made those games so enjoyable to me as a player. Not so much the fact that I was versing Brazil or that I was versing Russia. It was more the context of the game. And I've had a few games in women's where I've had that same enjoyment level because of the situation that I was in. We already mentioned the Canada game from Fort Wayne, but that's one of my favorite games that I've played since joining the women's team because it pushed me to be better and challenged me to be better and got me fired up for something that I wanted and I'd worked really hard for. And that just drove me to push harder and be better. And once again, Canada's a great team, but I wouldn't say that I'm a rival of them, if that kind of makes sense. So my biggest rival, I guess, is myself. I strive to be better each game, and the game situation and context is what kind of affects my drive. If that
you possibly talked about the 3 most pressurized situations that, as a player, you've been involved with, and how you've risen to the level that you need to be able to be successful. In that, I was actually, as I said, talking to Brazil last night, and they brought you up. We were talking about the rivalry where Australia and Brazil have played some interesting games, and obviously quarterfinals in Malmo, and then from a youth perspective, the final last year in
Final last
2019, the semi-final in 2017, and the semi-final in 2013, where we were knocking each other out of tournaments. So there's some pretty good alignment there. And they said, we're looking forward to seeing how number 8, and I had to correct them and say, well, it might not be number 8 anymore. But they said that, they just saw you as phenomenal and such a bright future in the game. So you've already attracted, your peers' respect from showing yourself in that way, which is a credit to you.
Thanks.
There's also challenged, I think, Brodie, I don't think I'm talking out of school, but playing against someone you idolise and admire, and maybe you can talk to that, Brodie, but that brings out Brodie's determination, because as much as she admires and idolises to an extent, who is it, Brodie?
Scepter.
I'm surprised you're not wearing her jersey.
Well, there's a whole other story. But as much as that also brings out, if you call that competitiveness, one thing I would say about women's goalball, which is startling to me, I think we go out there and we play like it's war. We will obliterate. Teams don't like each other on court, but we are universally renowned for looking past that, and I think we've got some really positive responses. We don't get, for some reason, draws never come out that we've played America a lot, but we've got a good relationship with America, and they're not fearful, but certainly wary and very guarded, and they rise to their best when they come up against us. The Israel thing goes back a lot of years, probably back as far as when I first ever got involved and the team travelled off to a World Championships and I couldn't travel in that thing. And there was a win there, and then we had another win, and then Israel, we lift each other. And I think you talked about the depth of women's goalball. I think that's because the rivalry is intense on court, but the admiration and the, we want to kick other teams' butts, but they want to kick our butts. But there's a universal understanding that we all are trying to get a hell of a lot better. And I think of all the sports I've ever been involved with in Paralympics, women's goalball has taken some steps forward that I don't think people thought they were going to take.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. And the comments from the USA coach when he was talking about Australia was that they never die. You never know. They're never going to roll over. They're always going to fight hard in games, and their team needed to be at their top to be able to match what your intensity was in your fight as an Australian women's team. So again, the respect from the rest of the world is definitely there. And as you said, you're right on the prefaces of having that breakthrough game that gets you to a medal round, and then anything's possible. And so I think that's a credit to the team of keeping on fighting and having that determination to keep improving and keep getting the best out of themselves. And that'll be really important in this phase leading into, such a disjointed competition with so much doubt. Like you said, you've had that preparation, you've had that limited adversity. So yeah, hopefully we can use that as an Australian team to be able to do that. The last kind of question I had for you guys is, the immediate future. Obviously, COVID-19 is impacting everybody around the world, and everybody's training schedule and tournament schedule is up in the air. What are things that the girls have been doing, Brodie, to be able to support each other? And I talked to Brazil as an example yesterday, and they're talking about doing things off the court which will make them stronger on the court and their teamwork component. What are some things that has really helped you with the team in this short term?
Well, since COVID struck and Australia kind of shut down, it's been hard to be motivated to train, and obviously for a period of time, gyms were shut, halls were closed. So training in general was very much limited to what it could be. The bells, one thing that I've found really helpful as part of this whole COVID preparation is monthly, the bells all hop online together and we have a chat because, yes, Australia's in lockdown, but we're also isolated. So like we have players in Queensland, players in New South Wales, players in Victoria, and it's just not feasible for us to get together right now and have a face-to-face catch-up and be able to bond and communicate in that kind of way. And so we've had monthly catch-ups where we've chatted online about how life is going, how training's going, the little things we can be doing in our daily routines in order to help us mentally prepare for the months ahead in the road to Tokyo. I personally have been reaching out to a few of my teammates, checking on them, seeing how they're going, and vice versa. And yeah, in terms of training, it's just doing the best we can with what we have at the moment, as there's no set date that this COVID situation is going to end. There's only so much we can do with the resources we have, and it's just making the best of those in order to help us get stronger, so that when we can meet face to face again, we can start to get back on track of those team goals that we need to be together for in order to achieve.
Yeah, great. And Pete,
that's a really good response too, because one of the things when we had the announcement that things were getting pushed back a year was I needed the girls to understand, and they've understood pretty well, you know, varying degrees of understanding, that they needed to take a mental rest because they were so geared to get that year right leading up to right now. To extend that by a year, that's a real challenge for anybody, and is a real challenge. And in giving them a mental break and encouraging them to stay physically in tune for themselves, life opens up. They have to fill that gap that would have been filled by team training, weekends away, with other things. So other options become more real. They're not quite as, so now we have to try and
narrow that focus again.
get the focus back with a year to go.
Yeah.
And realistically, we're unlikely to see each other till the new year.
Yeah.
But we're getting better at this, making connection. We have a sports psych. We're reaching out better, but I'm really okay about them coping with COVID life and looking after themselves, because they've physically kept themselves in pretty you'd be surprised at how hard these girls are training individually.
Yeah,
and if that's great for them, that's great. But there's also been a chance for recovery from injury, add some new things to your game, which may not have been done had this extension not happened. But the mental thing, I really believe in, they needed to just cope with COVID life.
For you, we talked just about sliding doors, Pete, in a sense, and thinking about, okay, well, maybe, you know, some of the senior players had an injury that's given them time to be able to come up. Maybe you've got some younger people in the squad and the team that have another year to train and have another year to develop their skills. Talk to us a little bit about that sliding door that every country is facing right now, where, yes, there's been some struggles and there's been some challenges, but on the other side, there offers some opportunities.
Well, I think and I don't think we've got it right, but I think you'd agree that we have done a pretty good job of supporting our youth women through the senior program, not just for preparation for youth worlds and that kind of stuff. And I think there's been certainly we've been able to support and really benefited from the youth girls. I think there's been a mutual benefit, but it's given them an insight, because it's really hard, I guess, to convey the size of the jump, the athleticism that these women are now exercising requires commitment to training, commitment to strength and conditioning. When you're first coming out, it's about opportunity, it's about travel, it's about the excitement of the game. But you can get to a certain level there to be the best team you can possibly be. There's attention to detail and preparation. And again, it's easy to be critical, but I think the women have been a pretty good example of going from being good and interested and committed and the best goalballers in Australia to athletes who want to get better, and they happen to play goalball.
Very much been my experience that you just summarized in a very short, like 20 seconds, Pete. I started playing because I liked the sport and I wanted to travel. And then that just then developed as the years went for a pure love of the sport, which then developed to me wanting to do better and be better for not only myself, but for the team. Because I wanted to be able to represent Australia with pride and know that what I'm doing was doing my country proud. And that, again, is just been amplified by then having the opportunity to potentially then go to a Paralympics, which is like the pinnacle event for many athletes around the world. To reach that sporting achievement is, like, as I said before, a life goal and like a accumulation of all those years of work paying off. And yeah, it's very much been like the women's team supported me when I was in youth, and that whole transition from youth to women's, I found the women's team to be super supportive. And now that I'm part of the women's team, I'm so for giving back to that youth program, because I can see how valuable that is in regards to Australia's future in terms of women's goalball and future Paralympics and where that's going to take us.
I think that's one thing that I would agree, Pete, is that the women's program and the youth girls program working together has given Australia a big advantage for the future, essentially, because you're talking to Brazil last night, I think 5 of the 6 women that are in their team played youth goalball for Brazil and have been in that program through youth world championships. And much like we've worked together across squads in the last 6 years to develop that, and starting to see the Brodies of the world develop and come through, it's a really important part of what youth development to the women's program should create.
And the Nikitas and the Mollys and the Michaelas and Amy, and at least it's given them an insight. So they're not coming cold, and we spent 4 years forging our own way and excuse the pun, but flying blind into elite sport. At least there's some input into understanding that better and making good decisions if that's the direction they want to go.
Yeah, for sure. Last question about the Paralympics is, obviously everyone wants to win the gold medal. That's a given. But personally and for the team, what do you want to see that team and personally take out of Tokyo?
Well, personally, my goal, so it would be amazing to come home with a medal, don't get me wrong, but my ultimate goal for the Paralympics is to be better than I am now. So I just want to be a little bit better than I was yesterday. That's my goal. So if I can get to the Paralympics and take each day as it comes and play that little bit better than I played the day before, I will be happy with how I played and how I represented my country. Obviously, the medal is another one of my goals, but it's not the be-all and end-all if we were to win or lose. I would judge how my Paralympics experience went off how I personally handled myself and the amount of effort and drive I gave to my games. So my goals are just to be better than I was yesterday. That's always been my goal, and I think it always will be until I retire.
Good goal.
Yeah. Yeah.
And from a bigger picture, I want to give the girls the opportunity. Therefore, to me, being a process-driven coach, I want to win game 1.
Yeah.
Because game 1 will lead to game 2, and if we win game 2, if we win game 1, we put ourselves in a better position. If we lose game 1 and we win game 2, we put ourselves in a better position. I I want to win a medal for these, with and for these girls. I've been in that position with wheelchair basketball. It's a moment in time, but it's a jigsaw puzzle. And the jigsaw puzzle, you cannot go to a Paralympics or any major championship and guarantee or know how you're going to win that medal. You've got to put the process in place, and that'll start with game one. I want to win game one. I want to get there. I want to get there healthy. I want to get there prepared, and I want to win game one. And look out if we, do all of those things, because then someone's going to have to stop us.
Yeah, it's taking it step by step rather than.
Absolutely. Well, thank you both for sharing some time with IPSA and the goalball world today. We really appreciate your time, and we wish you all the best for your journey over the next few months, and look forward to seeing you in Tokyo a year from now. Thank you very much, both of you.
No worries. Thank you.
Thank you.